All of the following benchmarks and throttling tests were conducted with an ambient temperature of around 28.5 degrees to 29 degrees Celsius. Now, with that out of the way, one of the premier features that people buy Google Pixel devices for is their cameras and their ability to do photo and video processing. So I wanted to see how benchmarks in a high stress environment would affect that performance. Now, to conduct this test, I created what I think might be my new standard for like real world testing, specifically of Pixel devices. And I went out and I filmed a 4K video at max settings, being 4K, 30, 10-bit HDR video. 5 minutes, maximum settings. I immediately came home and then I timed how long it would take for that video to stabilize after I made a copy of that video, obviously, because stabilization is something that takes an incredible amount of processing power, even on my desktop computer. Now, after I timed the length of time needed to stabilize the video, I then ran Geekbench 5 CPU, then Geekbench 5 Compute, then Geekbench 5 CPU, and then Geekbench 5 Compute. And I did these 4 benchmarks back to back to back to back to back, which would simulate something like gameplay or other high load activities on the device. Now, upon finishing that benchmarking, I immediately went back into Google Photos where I had made a second copy of that 4K 30 10-bit HDR video, and then I re-exported the unstabilized copy of that video with stabilization in Google Photos to see what kind of effect the thermal load and the benchmarking would have on the device. Since after running those benchmarks, we should have reached the maximum threshold of thermal saturation, meaning the device is going to get to the highest temperature Google would allow it to. This test in total took about 20 minutes or so from start to finish. Now, when I filmed the 4K video, I'd like to note that the device was barely warm to the touch. Then, after doing this throttling test, the device definitely was a little bit warmer, but the internal battery temperature indicated it had only gone up by approximately 8 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'll put whatever that would be in Celsius for you guys. Now, in Geekbench 5, we saw CPU scores drop by 8%, which I think is a respectable amount after the device has gone up to its thermal limitation. But with GPU scores, I actually found an increase in speed when seeing what those benchmark GPU scores were like. And then when we did the video stabilization test in Google Photos, there was almost no difference in the speed in which Google Photos stabilized that second unstabilized copy of that video, which is enough for me to say it's within a margin of error. So in general, I really dislike doing benchmark tests because more often than not, benchmark tests really don't illustrate how good or bad a device is kind of to use. Nor do benchmarks often reflect the change in user experience for an extended period of time. Now, I think that we can use benchmarks to tell how a manufacturer is going to tune a device and what kind of thermal limitations a manufacturer is going to set on that device. Now, it goes without saying that the Pixel 7 Pro isn't a gaming phone, and it will lose to other more gaming-oriented phones. It will also lose to devices that are cheaper, but have a newer Snapdragon SoC. So that's something that is kind of an obvious one. And particularly, it's not something that I necessarily care about. One, because I'm more often than not using my phone for long extended gaming sessions. And if you are, there's a ton of cheaper phones that are better for gaming, like a Poco F3 that you could buy used for like 150 to 200 bucks, or the Poco F4, which is essentially the same device, or even the Poco F2, which you could now buy used for next to nothing, and it has the same Snapdragon 865 and it has a 4700 milliamp hour battery. So with that out of the way, if you want a phone for gaming, go buy a gaming phone, or just go buy a really inexpensive used phone with a Snapdragon SoC. Let's just get that out of the way. That's not what this Pixel 7 Pro is about. Now, particularly, I'm really happy with how Google has tuned the performance of the Pixel 7 Pro. And it really seems like they are prioritizing consistent performance after thermal saturation. They will allow a device to get to a specific temperature and then begin to decrease that performance, but that decrease in performance will allow the device to repeatedly perform at a specific level. Now, I find that the overall day-to-day usage of the device and for doing things like photo and video, recording video for long extended periods of time, the device is great. The device doesn't get particularly hot and it exports and edits video extremely quickly. Now, it's this kind of consistent performance that will give users that are not gaming a positive long-term experience. And I much prefer this way of handling thermal performance over allowing the CPU and the SoC to get really, really hot and then struggling to rein that performance back in after the device has already become thermally saturated. I think that maybe the next step or the next type of benchmark thing like this that I would want to test is see how this device performs while being charged. Because while the Pixel devices don't have the fastest charging speed, they oftentimes value thermal performance and the ability to be able to use your phone and get consistent performance across most circumstances. Whereas other phones that I'd used in the past will go ahead and they will thermally saturate the device. Meaning, if you're trying to use your phone while charging, you are going to get significantly diminished performance. Whether that's because the company values faster charging speed over consistent performance, or if it's because the charging tech used heats up that device faster, thus forcing the device to then throttle and come back down. Either way, I think that the Pixel 7 Pro is particularly good for what it's meant to do. I don't think it's going to be particularly good at gaming for long extended periods of time, but with the availability of MediaTek powered devices, with the availability of Snapdragon 865 devices and other devices from a year to 2 years ago coming so far down in price, I'm not sure how many people would be cross-shopping these two devices, because for casual gaming, things that are less demanding, this device is going to perform extremely well. Now, I cannot comment on the thermal performance of the Pixel 7. It's been brought to my attention that the Pixel 7 does throttle more significantly because I have a Pixel 7 Pro and I have a Pixel 6. Now, if you want me to do some type of thermal benchmark comparison between my Pixel 6 or possibly my Pixel 6a and my Pixel 7 Pro, go ahead and comment in the comment section down below with what you would like to see. If you like the video, giving me a like would be awesome because it's the most important metric that Google uses for these videos. And until next time, peace.